Hey everyone, welcome to the sixth video of the series. Today we're going to be talking about variables. Let's first start with the definition. What are variables? So variables are places to store information that can be used in your procedure or module. And the way you create a variable is by using the equal operator. So we use the equal operator to assign a value to your variable. For example, you can write x equals 1. Actually, let's write it directly on the Visual Basic editor. So we'll start a new sub, call it variables, and we will say x equals to 1. And then we can step through the code. And if you now hover your mouse over the x, you'll see that it has an assigned value of 1. So this is the basic idea of variables within VBA. Now, there are a few rules when it comes to naming your variable. Your variable has to start with a letter. It can contain numbers or punctuation. It allows no space or math operators. Upper or lower cases are not considered. And you can be using reserved words for variable names. As you know, Excel has a certain number of reserved words like sub, dim, with, and next, or for. And obviously would be very confusing if you use these ones. Let's now talk about the importance of declaring your variable. And before going to this point, we need to talk a little bit about data types. Like in most of the other programming languages, VBA includes many different data types. You have strings, objects, integer, boolean, etc. And the reason you should know this is because when we create a variable, it is important to declare it. We have to let know Excel what kind of data we're talking about. If not, VBA will assign it by default as variant, which may eventually slow your code. Let's see how this works out in practice. Let's move back to the Visual Basic editor. And we'll go back to our code. To declare your variable, you would have to add this statement. Dim x as integer. Basically, by writing this, you indicate to Excel that your x will be an integer. It is actually excellent practice on Excel VBA to declare your variables. If you don't do it, your code will be slow. We might not see it in a small macro like this one, but the bigger your macro is, the more noticeable the difference is as well. Another good practice is to force yourself to declare variables with the mention option explicit. So let's see one more time how it goes in practice. So the way you write it, actually the place where you add the inscription is at the top of your code. Option explicit, enter. Excel will now force you to declare all your variables. Let's see what happens if we remove this declaration here and we run the code. Going through the code with the F8 step through function, and here's the error we're talking about. It says variable not defined, so as we talked about earlier, we will have to define it in the code. So I will rewrite my statement here, dim x as integer, and run the code again. The code works as intended. The mention option explicit is just needed once at the start of the module, so you won't need to add it every time you write a piece of code. Now let's talk about a very interesting concept in declaring variables. We often talk about public variables or static ones. If you want to make a variable available to all procedures within one module, you would have to declare all variables after the mentioned option explicit, as we just saw. Now instead, if you want to make a variable available to all procedures in all modules of a workbook, you would have to use a public variable. You would write something like public var as integer. And in this case, var is our variable. Now let's talk about static variables. Static variables retain their value even after the procedure ends. It can be really practical if you want to keep track of a number. For example, it can be used to track the number of times you execute a procedure. The variable value will not be reset at the end of the procedure. And it's important to note that it's a procedure level variable only. It is not applicable to other procedures. So let's jump back on the VBA and let's write sub var, and we'll write something like public, or like static var as integer. Now let's assign to our variable the value 2. And let's run through the code. Running through the code with F8, and then I finish my code. And now if I run it again, you can see that Excel kept in memory the value of the variable, which is 2, which basically didn't happen with a normal variable. This can be actually very practical when we're using loops and we want to keep a counter of the number of iterations that we did. And we're going to have a look at this more in details in the next video. For now, that will conclude our 6th video of the series. I hope you guys enjoyed it. In the next video, we're going to have a look at how to control the flow of Excel VBA program. And more details, we're going to see all these programming concepts that you probably heard of in other programming languages like if statements, else if statements, for loops, while loops, go-to statement. This one I think is specific to Excel. Thanks for watching. If you like the content and want more of it, be sure to hit the subscribe button.